share. Okay, you guys can see it now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. Welcome to our presentation on observations that we've made of intercultural communications in our community. I'm going to go ahead and start. So my first topic that I covered for this project was how communication is irreversible. So once you say something demoralizing to another individual, it is impossible to retract your statement. And I believe how an individual goes about communicating to complete strangers may show a lot about their character. So one of the observations that I made during this assignment was I observed customers that would walk into my restaurant that I work at, and I just wanted to observe their behaviors toward my coworkers and I. And one of the instances that I observed was when I actually received a phone call from a customer after a restaurant had closed, and he was clearly upset through his tone of voice, and he was upset over something that I had absolutely no control over. And he ended up calling me a liar and just terrible things. And after this encounter, I definitely internally felt like a little bit of shame, even though I knew that I had done nothing wrong. So I actually found this video and the situation about how a basketball player who played for the Lakers actually got into a verbal altercation with one of the opposing team players, which ended up in him actually having to pay a fine for shouting obscenities at him. So I'm just going to play a little clip of this video.
Yeah, we got a chance to speak and talk about the situation and just let them know, that I was sorry for the way I acted. I didn't handle myself the way I want to, and be able to talk and hopefully build a relationship off of that.
How recently?
So obviously, as you can tell, since verbal communication is extremely irreversible, this man actually just had to pay a $25,000 fine and just had to hope that his apology was good enough for the opposing team player, which he verbally assaulted. And so my next topic that I covered in my project was how generalizations are based on limited data and are then applied to a larger population. So I think it's fair to say that all of us have made generalizations at one point in our lives. And what I found through my observations was that I did see a lot of people already kind of making generalizations about how the food industry works and how restaurants work. But what actually stood out to me more was the fact that I found myself actually making generalizations about a specific population. For example, through any kind of negative encounter that I would have with a customer, I would just automatically make a generalization basically saying that, oh, all Newport Beach residents are like this. So through that generalization, I actually ended up not looking forward to coming into work. And I just think that it's upon ourselves to push away these generalizations and use any of the experiences that we have gone through just to hopefully steer us away from making generalizations like that. So I went ahead and found this one video that's a perfect example of actually how making generalizations and how communication is irreversible.
Random question. Have you guys seen a Mexican restaurant on the beach here?
I think this one a little down that way.
It's this way, right? I figured. Second question. I saw you guys walking this way. You look great, by the way. I see you holding hands. Are you guys just friends, or are you?
No, we're dating. We're together.
I thought you were gay for a second. Are you guys actually together?
Yes, we're dating.
Okay, well.
So I'm also not going to play this entire clip, but basically what actually ends up happening is this girl thinks that the guy who just approached her is some millionaire, right? And he has a Lamborghini. And basically what ends up happening is this girl breaks up with her boyfriend just to ride in this guy's Lamborghini. But then actually what happens is the guy actually takes the girl's ex-boyfriend and gives him a ride in the Lamborghini and gives him like an extremely expensive piece of clothing. So I just thought that was the perfect example for both of those concepts.
Okay, the first concept I'm going to use is cultural patterns. Cultural patterns is a term used to collectively describe those cultural values that characterize the dominant group within a culture. And it is integrated, which means it has many aspects in that. And also it's dynamic, which means it can change over time. And it can be contradictory. For example, in the United States, we say that all people are created equal, but most of the times we can kind of see some kind of contradictory within races and like between different groups. And one of the observations I did is by observing Taiwan's success in controlling of the spread of the coronavirus. And how does it relate to cultural patterns? Is that, well, Taiwan is a country next to China. It's very close to China, and so we know it's an Asian country. And for Asian countries, most people are very conservative, and we are also considered a collectivism society, which means we are very careful, and we also, before we do something, we also consider we also consider what will happen to the people around us. And one of the reasons Taiwan is very successful in controlling the spread of the virus is that before we had even one case of the virus, the government started the policies like telling people to wear masks and just try to be as careful as possible. And also, because people here are very collectivism, we consider what will happen to other people before we do something we want to do. So before people go into stores or get onto public transportations, people will make sure that they have masks and they sanitize everything they touch before they leave. Okay, next page.
Did it work?
So my second concept is nonverbal.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, that's it. Okay, my second concept is nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication involves all those nonverbal stimuli in any kind that are generated by both the source and his or her use of the environment, and that have potential message value for the source and or receiver. It can be intentional or unintentional, which means whether or not we mean to do something or send a message, it can be mistaken by the receiver. And my observation was done in a grocery store when I went shopping. Okay, so I was walking through the aisles and a man saw me, and I could really tell that he was intentionally avoiding me because he took all the way around me to like try to keep a distance as far as possible to go around me. And yeah, because I was doing the observation, so I followed him to see if he was going to do the same thing to other Asian customers, since we know Trump has been calling the coronavirus the China virus. So yeah, everybody in America is kind of like scared of Asians because they think they have the virus. So I followed the man, and what I saw is that, yeah, exactly like what I thought. He was avoiding every Asian customers he was contacting, and but when he passed over those non-Asian customers, he wasn't doing the same thing. So yeah, it's a kind of nonverbal communication, because whether or not he was intentional or unintentional, it was a kind of communication that uh, it was a kind of communication between people, that which means he was trying to keep a distance from Asians or Chinese people. Okay, Sean, your turn.
So the first concept I did was on culture shock. And culture shock is when a person is placed in a new cultural environment that would render almost all of your normative established patterns or behavior ineffective. And I first noticed culture shock in my own life, but also at work too. So I usually keep in like a day-to-day routine before this whole self-quarantine thing happened. And ever since then, school's gone online, so I don't have to drive or wake up anytime early to get to class. And I pretty much just carry out from home without going outside. And I also have my mom working at home now, so that I have to like keep quiet and whatnot. But the new environment came to a complete shock. It is the complete opposite of what I was doing before. When it comes to schooling, learning course material became tougher because I went online and I didn't have like a teacher to ask questions. And if I had a question, I had to wait like usually the next day for a response, and it just slowed down and made it tougher to learn what was being taught. The effects of culture shock, it can cause people to become physically and mentally tired, disoriented, homesick, or just wanting their whole lifestyle back. And can cause depression in really severe cases. And due to this, it causes people to act different, and the unknown of the virus has caused people to be, I guess, more uptight when it comes to just like interactions with people. Like I know at my work, when I go to hand someone their food, sometimes I just prefer it if I just like leave it on the table and then they'll come grab it and just like keep away as far as possible from us. And then yeah, so during my work, my coworkers and I are we have to wear masks now, but before we didn't have to wear them. We had a customer come in and complain to us, or start getting verbally aggressive towards one of the cashiers, saying like, oh, if you need to be wearing these masks, it's mandatory. And we told him that it wasn't. And while you understand that he just wants his food and everything to be sanitary, and so we didn't take like any harm to it, but it's just like this new environment has caused people to act more aggressive with with each other, rather than just like talking normally and having a normal like conversation. And the next concept I talked about is prejudice. And as Karen said, Trump called the virus the Chinese virus, and that obviously has a negative stigma towards Chinese and Asian people. And I observed 2 of the 5 levels of prejudice when I went out: discrimination and avoidance, and that was shown through media outlets and obviously the president. we have all like been victims to stereotyping people, and the best way to like combat prejudice is through research and by educating yourself through personal interaction with people. Like if you interact with someone and like take your experience with that person versus what a generalization like Trump did by calling it the Chinese virus, by assuming that people are just infected because of their where they're from or whatever. And then by calling it the Chinese virus, obviously causes a negative stigma and causes people to avoid them. And by avoiding them can make them feel unwelcomed or just overall not welcomed. And overall, people are just scared of the unknown, and this can cause people to react and think irrationally, which can cause negative tension between people. And if the people just obeyed social distancing rules and practices, then this pandemic will become a lot easier to control, and we can get our lives back, and people can go back to treating each other with respect rather than being rude to the ones that are essential workers and only working because they have to, versus going on unemployment. And that is the end of the presentation.